Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, April 8th. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Today we hear from Royals manager Mike Matheny, who spent about 20 minutes on a conference call with reporters on Tuesday. There's some interesting stuff there, like how the Royals are keeping tabs of their players who are spread across the country and in different countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. He touched on the idea of Major League Baseball reconvening in Arizona in May, as originally reported by ESPN's Jeff Passan, and how eager Matheny is to start managing again after a year away from the bench. But first, we check in with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy and talk about what a baseball season with all 30 teams playing in the Phoenix area would look like. So here we go with Lynn, and then after a break, we'll pick up the Mike Matheny question and answer session. All right, Lynn, we heard from Mike Matheny, Royals manager, yesterday in about a 20-minute Q&A with reporters. You were part of that. And it came on the heels of a pretty interesting report by our buddy Jeff Passan at ESPN, former Star reporter, who broke the news about baseball maybe returning a little bit sooner than we anticipated, but in quite an unusual way. What do you make of the idea of baseball maybe coming back in a month to 6 weeks in one location?
To me, it's still just a lot of the logistical things to make that happen. I feel like there's a lot of questions that I still have, that I'm sure people in baseball still have, that the answers to which decide whether or not this is really feasible. I think the idea of getting baseball back as soon as possible is something that a lot of people would be, on board for, assuming that you can make sure it's safe and that you're not taking away from resources that are needed elsewhere in the country right now, which is a big if. But still, one of the big things to me is the number of people that you'd end up having to sort of sequester or sort of lock down in this sort of baseball bubble here that they're talking about. Because when I think about a team, and people say, oh well, you get 25 to 30 guys, but it's probably like almost double that, or maybe even
Yeah, at least that, right?
when you start talking about, because, maybe you expand the rosters to 28, 29, 30, but you still need more players than that because nobody goes through a season with just the guys that are on your roster. And I don't think that changes just because of, you're putting them all in one spot and you're not traveling. I think there's still, you're talking about playing 120, 130 games that you have to factor in. You're going to need, more pitchers because you're talking about playing double headers regularly. You're going to need more position players. You're going to be playing in 120-degree temperatures in Arizona on a daily basis, so you're going to need extra guys. So I think you probably need at least your full 40-man roster, and that means trying to keep those guys around, working out, trying to keep them somewhat sharp on a regular basis. But I'm not sure if you just get through with your 40-man, but I think you need at least that. And then you add in staff, managers. I was looking at the Royals list. I think between coaches and staff, 16 people, and that's not including the clubhouse people and the video guys. And, so I think that number is really a lot higher than that. And so you add that to a 40-man, I think you get close to 60 or 70 people real quick, and then times that by 30. So you're talking a good 2,000 people before you even get to the people that, outside of that in stadiums and, camera people and the hotels where people are sequestered. So it's a lot of people. I think that's the first thing that hits me is just how big that number is and what an undertaking that is to actually pull that off.
Yeah, and so we're talking about, obviously we're talking about the Phoenix area where there exists not only the stadium where the Diamondbacks play, but many spring training facilities for half of Major League Baseball. The other half trains in Florida. But yeah, bringing every team to the Phoenix area, and as you said, having to put them in hotels, having to get the meals and all the logistical problems of that. What might something like this even look like? Would they play games, multiple games in a day? Are we talking about the double headers, or what do you what is what have you allowed your mind to conjure on a, you know, 30 baseball teams in one city using, I don't know, a dozen stadiums, and at least get the baseball season started.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the logistical stuff aside, and those are big ifs there. But to think about if this could actually get pulled off, and you're saying every Major League Baseball team is going to be within that sort of small baseball bubble and playing whether it's going to be a half a season, well, more than half a season, at least that's the idea, but two-thirds of a season, and that sort of environment is, if you let yourself think about it, that's sort of a cool thing to think about. Just every baseball team being in this small area playing games every day. The idea of maybe there's two games a day in certain places, three games maybe in some places, depending on the day, if they can work that out. I mean, it's crazy to think about double headers on a regular basis. I mean, it's just baseball overload. The type of thing that where everything in the baseball world is sort of right there in the I should say the baseball world, in in this country at least, North America, I should say, is right there in one place. Would be sort of crazy to think about. It would be a cool thing to be a part of, assuming again that it'd be safe and you'd be able to do it. But yeah, so I think from that extent, it would be, especially at a time where there's no sports, to have all of baseball in one place playing daily, all the best players in the game in the same place on a regular basis. That would be pretty cool to see. And then just to see how teams work around what's going to be a new format in terms of just the rosters and everything else, and playing, all these games in sort of a shortened period of time, but also playing with no fans in the stands. There were talk of, the players wouldn't even be in dugouts; they'd be spread out to, maintain that social distancing in the
Right.
stands. So it would be sort of a cool thing to imagine to see how it would unfold. I just For me, it's still a matter of sort of getting past the steps that would need to take place for them to be able to, feel like this is feasible and safe to do. But it is sort of neat to think about what it would look like to have, not just baseball back, but baseball back in this sort of, uh, mecca of baseball out in Arizona.
Right. Well, there's a little bit of a trial run going on somewhere, across the globe in South Korea right now, with the Korean professional leagues back on the field playing some scrimmages in empty stadiums with masks, and trying to see if they can restart their season. These some of these scrimmages are on YouTube. You can find them on social media. So they've been doing it for, I don't know when they restarted, but it's just been a few days, I suppose, since South Korea has been running these scrimmages. So I guess the world is looking at how it's being handled there to see if it's a possibility in the U.S. And I look at one positive. They tried this in Japan even earlier, and trying to with with the sequestered teams, and then a couple of players on one team got the virus and they had to shut it all down again. So, and I suspect that would happen in Korea right now, and could happen in, if Major League Baseball decided to go ahead with this. You have one positive test on a team, and you're going to have to quarantine for a couple of weeks. So that's another, just another potential, problem for doing it this way. So, hey, Lynn, Mike Matheny was asked about this on Tuesday. He held about a 20-minute Q&A with reporters. We're going to play that in its entirety here after you and I finish gabbing. But what was there any kind of revelation, or did you learn anything from the Mike Matheny update? I know he's had some one-on-ones with reporters here in the last couple of weeks, but I think this was the first group session that I've seen him on, and I enjoyed it, and I was a little bit. One thing that not surprised me, but I learned from him, was just the extent to which the Royals are keeping their eyes on their players who are scattered across the country. I imagine every major league team is doing this, but to hear it from Mike Matheny was interesting.
Yeah, and I think I wasn't sure, and I mean you'll play it, but I wasn't sure if he how he would address it or if he would address it all because I think Major League Baseball has sort of wanted teams not to speculate and to sort of speak out of turn about things that might go on. But he was pretty candid. He did obviously make sure to preface it by the fact that there was speculation, but he was pretty clear that he thought anything to get back to baseball, he was sort of anxious and excited about. But overall, I think just the idea of how often they keep in touch as a staff and also with the players, like he was saying that players probably hear from somebody on the staff 3 to 5 times a week. The fact that they're sending back videos. I mean, like they're doing Zoom calls and things like that with the staff, and they're having sort of small group sort of communications with between the staff and players. But also just the fact that they're seeing videos from players. The guy has a question about something he's sort of working on a swing because he's got some sort of setup where he can go and take swings, whether it's in the backyard or if he's sort of I think Joey Votto from the Rangers had that video that was on Twitter where he literally had like a tee and a net that he was hitting into in his house somewhere. So like guys are able to send videos back to the coaching staff. Pitchers are able to throw bullpen sessions and send that video to the coaching staff to get feedback. And then there's they're in communication with the strength coaches and things too. In the story I wrote, I mentioned I saw on Instagram a whole video of just different aspects of Salvador Perez's workout, from catching drills to running on the street to doing box jumps and workouts and look like this patio type area. So there's a lot more back and forth and a lot more just being able to get eyes on through technology than I probably expected.
Okay, we're going to hear Mike Matheny talk about this, and you'll hear it in its entirety after a break. Hey, Lynn, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Stars award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening.
Just wondering, over the last 3 weeks, how many different scenarios you've kind of come up with in terms of what your roster might look like whenever we do resume?
Well, I think like everybody else, Flanny, just you'd have to speculate at this point, not knowing exactly how it's going to work out. You hear a lot of different ideas, roster sizes, but more than anything else, just trying to keep in touch with all the guys, and that's been kind of the focus: is how do we stay in touch with the players, and how do we keep them all engaged, and hopefully trying to stick somewhere close to where they were when they left Arizona. So trying still to not commit to eliminating anybody, or trying to figure out what the guys are needing at this point to help give them a chance to jump right back into the competition when we get back together.
No guitar?
No tambourine for you? I was waiting.
I was ready to jam. Come on, man.
I can find a guitar if you're lead vocals here.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, Flanny.
Who's next?
Mike, it's Alec.
Yeah.
What is a day like for you right now? I mean, I imagine it's like part phone calls, maybe spending time with family. Can you just walk us through what a day is like right now for you?
Yeah, all the above, and there's no doubt we've had more family time than I ever anticipated, and it's been great. 3 boys home from college, so having dinners together every night, that's a special deal for us. But during the day, we're trying to stay in touch. We're trying to get to work. So we have another Zoom call lined up tomorrow with all the staff. We have some small group Zoom calls lined up to break the guys into different groups, and just kind of a whole lot of different topics, going through rules, going through some of the individual groups with as far as catchers or outfielders, infielders, throwing some different things out to hitters, throwing some different scenarios out there, even some baseball 101. I don't know if any of you have seen some of the videos the coaches are doing, but we've been posting some of those as well. But just trying to take that up a notch to make sure that we're communicating with the players in a unique way. But I think this Zoom stuff, FaceTime, however we can get a little bit of eye to eye, even though it's via technology, I think that's our next step. We've done a lot of texting, done a lot of phone calls. These guys are probably getting between 3 and 5 calls a week from somebody on staff. So we're staying in touch. They're doing a great job of sending over videos, whether it's their swings, whether it's their side sessions or their bullpens that they're makeshifting, whether it's thrown into a net or to a screen, or if they do have somebody in the house that they can work out with. So it's Alec, we've just tried to really turn up the volume with communication, and feel like that's one of the most important things we can do right now.
I don't know if you've seen, like, in the last day, there's this report about possibly playing in Arizona. What do you think of that? Just really broad. I'm curious just what you think of that idea.
Well, obviously, it's, once again, I think the title of our conversation, speculation, right? So that's the first step, as we know that there are just kind of some ideas that are being thrown out there. But I'm excited that Major League Baseball and the commissioner's office, they're in conversation, and they're in contact with the powers that be, and with our politicians and with our health officials, to try and figure out how could we possibly do this? How could we be safe and make sure that we're safeguarding everybody, but also trying to figure out a way to get the game going. And that's exciting for me. I know it's exciting for our players to hear. Now, whether that exactly how it was lined out today, whether that's how it goes or not, but the fact that we see and we hear that there are people trying to figure out how to make this happen, I think our nation needs it right now.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, Al. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, it's Lynn. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing great, Lynn. Thanks.
I wondered how would you describe sort of the tone you try to set when you're communicating with the players? Because there's this sort of in between time where you guys know they're taking time with their family, but they're still trying to stay sharp and stay ready. I mean, what's for you as you're communicating, your staff's communicating with them?
Yeah, from the first time I reached out to them, Lynn, kind of sent a whole an email out to everybody that was still in camp, and just encouraging them more of the mental gymnastics of not looking at this like another version of an off season. And the way that I termed it, I stole it from Brad Keller when he said it just feels like a really long rain delay. And I said, I think that's the idea, is how do you stay sharp, still kind of ready in your mind, but not knowing exactly the timing. And I think that's probably, it'd be a competitive edge to our guys if they could stay in that mode, at least on the mental side, which then drives to what they're doing their work. So first and foremost, when we check in with them, it's, tell us how things are going with you and your family. You have any concerns or questions, then we direct them to people that they might have some better answers than what we as a coaching staff would have. And then after that, it's, all right, how can we help prepare something? And Stoney in the strength department, Nick Kenny, and our trainers, they've all put together some really good plans for these guys. Even if they're in lockdown and they're in their homes, there's some pretty detailed and pretty tough workouts. I can send them to you guys if you want them. But some workouts that you don't really need anything except some home equipment and maybe some TRX bands or some stretch bands, but they'll challenge you, and you can do those inside the confines of your home. So trying to get in with guys on a consistent basis, just to hear what some of the struggles they're having, but more importantly, just trying to let them know that we don't know how this thing's going to play out, and that flip could switch at any time, and are we going to be ready? So have your mind ready and have your body as close to being ready as what we can do, while still, playing along and follow the rules and being really careful and being safe for not just ourselves, but for others. But just trying to keep all that messaging pretty consistent.
Hey, Mike, Rob Collins at Fox 4. How long would it take the guys to get ready physically? Do you have a timetable? What do you think, just because you can't really talk to them very often and see physically from your perspective?
Well, we are getting some pretty good feedback. They're sending us some videos of when they're throwing, and the starters are kind of trying to simulate every 5 days throwing somewhat of a pin, even if it's in their garage to a net. Which that's really, even in a normal spring training, I think that's our concern, is how do we keep our pitchers, get them built up, have them ready. And then you figure that the hitters are going to catch up when they get the live looks and they get enough of them. That magic timing, I've heard everywhere from 4 weeks all the way down to 2. I think 2's a push, unless you were really just kind of stuck in tight confines to where you'd have to make that work, and you'd get bored playing against an inter squad situation every single day. But I think we could make just about anything work. But there would just have to be, once again, there's a lot of speculation to roster size, which that starts talking about your pitching and how do we protect guys' arms. And I think a lot of those questions are being thought through from the commissioner's office, and excited to hear kind of where it goes from here, and what we can do to kind of help make it work whenever they give us the green light. But I know that there's a group of people that are spending a lot of time trying to figure out what that magic number is. And the commissioner's office has been in conversation with us and asking myself and the coaching staff, what do you think about these? And we give answers just like I gave. I think it need to be somewhere around 3 weeks, probably an ideal situation, but we'll make whatever work. We'll make it work.
Thanks.
Sure.
Hey, Mike, Todd Lebo at Sports Radio 810. First off, logistically, where are all your players right now? Are they all around the country? And kind of, have they encountered coronavirus? Any of their families, any of their friends? What's kind of reports are you getting from them on that?
Yeah, Todd, we don't have anybody that's been affected personally to our knowledge yet. And once again, we're in pretty close communication, and none of their family members, but they're all over the country. We have guys even down in the Dominican Republic. We have a larger group down in Miami. We still have some guys who decide just to stay in the Phoenix area. And we have everyone else, even guys in New Jersey area, two players in New Jersey who, we keep in close contact with them. They seem to be close to the epicenter of this. But it's wherever their hometowns are, a lot of them just want to get back with their families, and we understand that. And it's been pretty impressive to watch how creative they've been to make sure that they're following the local guidelines, but also doing whatever they can to stay baseball ready. And I think they've bought into some of that messaging I was talking earlier about, because they feel that it's not going to take them long to get off the mound or to get in the box and get caught up to being pretty close to where they were when we left Surprise.
And do most of the guys have some sort of, especially the pitchers, do they have a place where they can throw and kind of feel like they're really throwing a bullpen?
Well, I think, I've had some videos sent where guys are in their own backyard and they built their own mound. We had other guys, a number of these guys have had facilities or had cages even on their own properties already at home. So they've had an advantage for sure. But there are a couple who've had to get a little more creative in their garage, but they'd have somebody in their family they can play catch with and simulate a bullpen. But for the most part, they're kind of fallen into that routine that they had. Now they're not getting into the gym because most of the gyms all across the country are going to be closed down. That's a tough spot to be, but they're finding out ways to get the workouts in. But the baseball thing, they're making it happen, and sometimes just creative spaces.
You mentioned early on there kind of taking advantage of having your boys at home and kind of enjoying that part of it. But just personally, how anxious are you to get back and be a manager of a Major League Baseball team? You went through all the off season and the work down and Surprise, and now you're in this waiting game. How anxious are you just for yourself to get out there and get after this thing?
Yeah, I think everybody who was in Surprise would agree that it was just disappointing, because things were really tracking in a great direction while we were in spring training. And with that being said, we understand that there are things that are outside of our control and much bigger issues. So we've had to kind of just get past that disappointment, and with that disappointment comes that just readiness. And I've not just preaching to these guys about just staying ready in your mind. It's truly what I'm doing as well. So trying to stay on top of as many things as I can. And most of that's just staying in touch with the players and trying to figure out with our staff what we can do to be ready when that bell rings, because you just never know if something happens and all of a sudden we're put in a different direction.
Thanks. Hope to see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Mike. Mick Schaefer, 41 Action News. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Mick. Thank you.
Good. Hey, if a plan does hatch similar to the one in Phoenix, everybody goes down there and plays in the desert, and guys are forced to isolate and quarantine from like their entire families, their wives and their kids. How big of an ask would that be for you and your players?
Well, I mean, we always talk about balance, and our organization does a great job of making sure that we're trying to encourage guys to have more than just baseball. But this is these are times where you just kind of have to get out of the comfort zone sometimes. So I don't think it would be ideal, and I think kind of along the same thought process we've been talking here. Let's go down, and if in fact that is something that happens or something along those lines, jump in and just do what we can, and trust that you never know when we may be able to get reconnected with our families, and trust the leaders of our government and the health officials that when they believe it's safe and it's right, we'll be able to do that. But until then, we have an opportunity to go make an impact. I just that's one of the things that excites me most is, being a part, right after 9/11, watching how baseball went. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is just not as big a deal as what's going on globally right now. But watching how baseball was part of the healing process, and realizing and talking with our guys about the privilege of being able to be a part of that, and could bring just a great source of escape and a distraction to a world that's looking for something a little bit different, something a little different in the news. I think it'd be a great honor if we're able to make this work. And I think part of that would be some sacrifices from what you would normally have.
Thanks.
Mike, Len Jennings with KMBC. First off, I'll take you up on your offer for a workout because I need something to get back into shape.
All right, we'll send something.
But you had some, and going back on the Flannery's question about the roster, and I know you're not sure about the expanded roster, but you had some young guys like Brady Singer doing well in spring training. Does it kind of impact if you're going to have a shortened season or well, you will have a short, but when baseball comes back, how does that deal with when you're kind of putting a roster together when you have some of these young guys? Is it better to shelve them for the season or to bring them up? Or it's a decision that you don't know when you're going to make.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty deep question that's going to have to go through multiple layers and levels to get to the right answer with that. And obviously, we'll be in close conversation with Dayton and with JJ Piccolo and the development staff and trying to figure out. And Dayton's been very clear from the beginning. A guy just first has to show that he's ready, and then there has to be an opportunity. Now, if you start talking about expanded rosters, or you start talking about having, trying to get creative on how you're going to be able to have enough pitching to get as many games in, I think you start going outside of maybe any template you've ever had before. So, but I know we have some really impressive players that have been at the major league level. We still have quite a few pitchers in camp that we believe we have that kind of depth that allow us to compete without ever putting somebody in a position that they're not ready for. And so I think that would be the number one key is how are we certain that this particular player is ready, even understanding that, things have changed. It's a different atmosphere and environment. Are they ready for this challenge? And it's going to look different from some of the different speculation that's out there right now. And if that were the case, then you'd have to expect that you'd have to get aggressive with how you use your roster, and maybe some of your younger players.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, Mike, this is Lynn again. I just had one question I wanted to ask you about. You were talking about some of the young guys there. I wondered, for some of the veteran guys, specifically a guy like Salvi who was coming back, or a guy like Gordo who, is obviously, in the past talked about retirement. Is there more of a sense of urgency in your interaction with those guys where they have this time where they just have to be away from the game?
Yeah, I think Lynn, I think there could be a blessing in disguise for maybe a couple guys. And I don't know if Gordo falls into that as much as Salvi, at being a year out from the surgery. And you saw every day how ready this guy was. So But knowing that we were going to have to kind of temper how we went about working with him, I think the extra time probably plays into his hand. I would say Mondesi's probably in that same camp. He was being real close to whether he was going to be ready for opening day. This little extra time should help him. But for the majority of the guys, we were in a really good place health-wise. So I don't think we really look at the season any differently. One, we just don't know what we're looking at. And the second thing is each of these guys train their mind as well as they train their body to be ready to play every single game that they let us play. So depending on how this thing plays out, and, first of all, we're speculating baseball, period. I mean, there are a lot of doubters out there of what'll happen. I tend to take that optimistic viewpoint that somehow this is going to get worked out at some point. And I just don't want the guys to be prepared that's going to happen sooner than later. I think we could always tone it back on the backside instead of trying to flip the switch and turn it on. And every single one of our players, whether it's the veteran like a Gordo and Salvi, or whether it's some of our guys who are in their first spring camp, there's no real perfect way to go about it at this point except to keep training, keep your mind engaged. And that's where we as coaches are trying to step in and just keep challenging them a little bit differently of maybe some of the things that they need to be thinking about during the season, and start getting their mind ready as if we're going to start here real soon. And then know that we're prepared just in case that bell does ring.
Well, that'll do it for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our production crew of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welch, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Links to the stories we discussed are in the show notes, and all of Lynn's Royals coverage can be found on kansascity.com and kansas.com. We told you earlier about a Sports Pass offer, and that offer is still on the table. If you want to add all of the Stars coverage, including news of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a way to get that as well. Go to account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe and sign up for the digital subscription. We'll be back on Thursday for another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.